Hey, everybody. Hope and pray that you're doing well today as we come to our word from the word. And today that word is unless. Unless. Now, as you get to chapter 31, I mean, here we are continuing in the story of Jacob and with Jacob and Rachel and Leah and, all their kids um, and all the time they spent with Laban. And now it is time for him to leave. Right. And so there's been some animosity going on, and you see the kind of arguing going before, but now you're going to get the accusation basically that everything Jacob has, that he has robbed it from Laban. And the truth of the matter is that God has been blessing Jacob despite Laban's deceitfulness and his ploy, I guess, to go against Jacob. And so let's be honest, there's deceit on both sides, and you'll see this in the story today. And it's amazing, as they're leaving, as Jacob and he gets his wives and children, and they're leaving, and they do it by secret. He deceives Laban, doesn't tell him that they're fleeing. That gets Laban upset. He ends up catching up with them, and so what we're going to look at today is going to be part of that conversation. But one of the things that, as they're leaving, Rachel steals her father's little gods. Why? Who knows? And we could probably talk about that another time as well. But she steals them, and they leave. Well, then when Laban catches up with them, he makes the accusation against them stealing, and Jacob, not knowing Rachel stole these things, he says something really dumb. He vows that, hey, whoever has them, if you find them in our camp, then whoever has them, you just go on and put them to death. And it's amazing Laban didn't find them. It's interesting in the way that Rachel hid them is because she put them in a bag that would normally go on the camel, and then she was sitting on that, and then she claimed that she was on her period, and so that meant that they were anything she sat on was ceremonially unclean. So her father never checked those bags, but so he never found them. But he knew. He's like, no, I know you've stolen them. I know you've taken them. So Jacob spoke too soon. And if you remember later on, you'll see uh, Jacob's sons make a promise like that to Joseph when he says, well, hey, whoever has the cup, let them be put to death. And they find it in Benjamin's bag. But you remember that was a little trickery going on there. We'll get to that later. The point today is I want you to hear what Jacob says in response. Now, Jacob, again, not a sin free man, not a perfect man, had been deceptive and will still be deceptive at times, and that he'll also be deceived. But at least with this, we can understand he knows how he was blessed and why he was blessed. And so that's what we're going to look at today with that word unless. Genesis 31, verses 36 through 42 today. Then Jacob was angry and rebuked Laban, and Jacob answered and said to Laban, what is my trespass? What is my sin that you have so hotly pursued me? Although you have searched all my things, what part of your household things have you found? Set it here before my brethren and your brethren, that they may judge between us both. These 20 years I have been with you, your ewes and your female goats have not miscarried their young, and I have not eaten the rams of your flock. That which was torn by beast I did not bring to you, I bore the loss of it. You required it from my hand, whether stolen by day or stolen by night. There I was. In the day the drought consumed me, and the frost by night, and my sleep departed from my eyes. Thus I have been in your house 20 years. I served you 14 years for your 2 daughters, and 6 years for your flock, and you have changed my wages 10 times. Now here's the key. Unless the God of my father, the God of Abraham, and the fear of Isaac had been with me, surely now you would have sent me away empty handed. God has seen my affliction and the labor of my hands, and rebuked you last night. Now, the last night was a portion you can read where God appeared to Laban and tells him that he cannot say anything against Jacob, good or bad. Warns him about what he's about to do. And that was proof that Jacob was telling Laban. You understand that that was a display of what God has been doing all along. He said, unless God had been through all of this, I would have left and had nothing. And this is a beautiful picture of him leaving the land with all these possessions and families and the blessings that he's leaving with. It is a kind of a foreshadowing of the Israelite nation leaving Egypt, where God said he was going to bring them out with great possessions, and he did. He blessed them, a fulfillment of his promises. And I wonder today, I wonder how many of us would look back at our lives, and even as we look at the way maybe people have mistreated us, that companies have mistreated us, and you can look to them and say, man, I've worked for you all this time, and I've done this and I've done that, and man, there was things that, he's saying as a shepherd, he said, look, if and a wild animal took it, typically that would be on the owner of the sheep to pay the price. Even sometimes if they were stolen, sometimes still the owner would bear that burden. But yet Jacob had to do it. So it's like there's all these times I've paid prices I didn't know. And maybe you said the same thing, right? You've been in a company, you put all this work in, and you've done things above and beyond, and you've taken things out of your personal bank account to take care of things and to help it out. And whatever the case may be, you can kind of see his argument. But I wonder if we have the same insight to say, unless God had been with me for all this time, I would be walking out of here empty-handed. I wonder how many times we would be leaving and going ahead empty-handed had it not been for the hand of God. And that's what Jacob recognizes. And as you follow along in the story, as he is reminded of that dream, he is reminded of the ladder where he saw the angels going up and down, that he was reminded, and even as he's saying this to Laban, you can kind of see it in the background that, look, God has been in control. God has been orchestrating this by way of his angels, by way of his messengers, by way of his mighty hand. And he says, Laban, he rebuked you and he showed you his plan last night. He showed you that all this time he's been choosing to bless me. Now, for Laban and for our enemies, for those who would try to persecute us, those that would try to extort things out of us or go above and beyond what they should, they will one day understand that God has always had his hand on the church. God has always had his hand on believers. God has always had his hand on those who trust in him. Our problem is, because it's one thing, we were talking about that Sunday, right? The enemies one day are going to find out exactly who's been in control all this time. But as Christians who know the truth, our problem falls in that we won't stand up and say what Jacob said. Because what we'll do is we'll stand up and say, look what I did. All this time I did all these things. And we would have stopped with that. I've worked so hard. I've put in the long hours. I've done this and I've done that. And it's not just job. I mean, we do it with family and with other worldly things. And even with the church, we'll argue with God. I've done all these things, blah, 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 blah. And yet we never stop, or we stop short, and we never complete that sentence and complete that thought and complete that idea that understands, unless God had been in charge of it all, I would have nothing to show for it. And what that does is that generates an attitude of thanksgiving, an attitude of gratitude. Today, will you stop and be thankful that God has given and God has blessed and God has used and God has done all these things? And will you stop and recognize him and praise him and say, God, unless it had been for you, I would have nothing. But let's not stop by just praising him. Let's make sure that we praise him before others. Let's be sure to tell others we would have none of these things had it not been for the grace and the mercy of our great God. God bless you, and I pray you have a great, great day.